Few Americans knew what coffee was decades ago, and others thought it came in a can. However, a small retailer from Seattle changed that and went on to become the world's largest coffeehouse chain, Starbucks. While created by three friends, it was not they who made Starbucks into a billion-dollar enterprise. Starbucks was founded by an outsider, a poor youngster from Brooklyn who had just graduated from high school the year before. Gordon Boker was a University of San Francisco student traveling across Europe in 1962. He ordered a cappuccino right away in a cafe in Rome. The flavor surprised him. It was unique, incredible, and unforgettable. Most Americans drank instant coffee at home or overcooked coffee in diners during the time. When he returned to the United States, he dropped out of the University of San Francisco and relocated to his hometown of Seattle. To satisfy his addiction, he would drive from Seattle to Vancouver, British Columbia, to Murchie's, a store that sold and roasted coffee beans. Gordon had the idea for a coffee shop in Seattle while driving home from a coffee run in 1970. He discussed the notion with his two buddies, Jerry Baldwin and Zev Siegel. They decided to start a business together and went to Pete's Coffee House in Berkeley. Alfred Pete, the son of a coffee merchant in Amsterdam, was the owner of the establishment. Alfred roasted his coffee dark in the European style because it brought out the full flavors of the beans in just a few weeks. Alfred taught Gordon, Jerry, and Zev the European manner of running a business and roasting coffee. Howard Schultz had recently graduated from high school and was about to start college at Northern Michigan University that year. He was the first member of his family to attend college on an athletic scholarship. He was injured during his first season and had to retire from football. He took out loans, worked as a barman, and occasionally sold his blood to pay for education. He took a position in Xerox's sales training program after graduating from college and became a successful salesman. But he eventually became restless and desired something more challenging. As a result, he ended up working for Hammerklass, a Swedish company that marketed kitchen and housewares. He rose through the ranks to become a vice president and general manager. He received a salary of $75,000, a company car, expense accounts, and unrestricted travel. Still, he had the impression that something was missing. In 1981, Howard spotted a small store, coffee producer Starbucks, putting abnormally big purchases for a trip. Starbucks had only 4 outlets at the time, yet it purchased more merchandise than Macy's, one of the world's largest department stores. He'd never been to Seattle before, but he wanted to see what was going on at their old store in Pike Place Market. They only sold coffee beans, but occasionally provided sampling samples. Howard tried a sample and became addicted. He felt as if he had discovered entirely fresh material. He couldn't stop thinking about Starbucks on his aircraft ride back to New York, describing it as a dazzling diamond. So he contacted Jerry and inquired if it could possibly fit into Starbucks. While Jerry liked the idea, his partners were concerned about bringing in a high-powered New Yorker. Some days, Howard couldn't believe he was thinking about it. As his mother would put it, "You're doing great. You will have a future. Don't give it up for a small company that no one has heard of." Jerry and Gordon brought Howard to San Francisco after a year to meet their silent partner, Steve Donovan. Howard was certain that it would return to New York with an offer in hand. He was mistaken. Jerry's partner refused to hire him because it was too hazardous, but he couldn't take no for an answer and phoned Jerry anyway. He informed him he was making a grave mistake and that Starbucks' fate was at stake. Jerry called him the next day to tell him he got the job and asked when he could come to Seattle. "No," he wrote in his memoir, "great success does not come by chance." Howard had been with Starbucks for a year when he was dispatched to Milan to attend an international houseware show in 1983. He observed several espresso cafes on his way to the event and was charmed by the ritual and romanticism. He got an epiphany while watching. Starbucks sold excellent coffee beans, but did not sell coffee by the cup. According to his memoir, They considered coffee like vegetables, something to be packaged and sent home with the groceries. They were a long way from the heart and spirit of what coffee has represented for millennia. Howard rode a train to Verona one day and imitated someone's coffee order, allotted from a cafe. He characterized it as the ideal combination of steamed milk and coffee. No one had ever acknowledged his strength to him before, and he reasoned that no one in America was aware of it. I'll have to bring it back with me. When Howard returned to Seattle and told his bosses about his discovery, they dismissed him as an overly enthusiastic marketing director. They claimed that Starbucks was a retailer rather than a restaurant or a bar. He later discovered that the reason his suggestion didn't appeal at the time was because Jerry was exploring another chance that piqued his interest more. Starbucks purchased Peet's in 1984, leaving them significantly in debt and preventing them from trying out new ideas. It took Howard about a year to persuade Jerry to try serving espresso. He didn't think it was a top priority, but he agreed to do it for the opening of Starbucks' 6th store in downtown Seattle. Despite the fact that sales flourished, Jerry thought that the store's success was incorrect and that they were too deeply in debt to continue. For months, Howard was despondent and split between his allegiance to Starbucks and his idea for Italian espresso cafes. Howard went to a downtown athletic club to play basketball at the time, when he was matched with a lawyer named Scott Greenberg. He met Scott for beers on occasion and shared some of his grievances with him over time. When he told Scott that he was considering becoming independent, Scott suggested that investors could be interested. He thought to himself, "This is my opportunity," after discussing his plan with Scott and his partner Sherry. "If I don't grasp the opportunity, if I don't step out of my comfort zone and risk everything, if I wait too long, my moment will pass." He finally took the decision to leave Starbucks and establish his own business in 1985. Il giornale is the word that is used for newspaper in Italian. Jerry startled him as he was planning how to approach investors to raise funds for his company. He summoned him to his office and offered to invest $150,000 of Starbucks funds in him. With Jerry and Gordon's help, Howard was off to a wonderful start. He believed he could raise all of the funds he required in 6 months. Howard and Gordon even traveled to Italy to explore coffee shops and meet with Amy, an espresso machine manufacturer, in Milan. He planned to return to Seattle with a $1 million investment, but Amy declined. They maintained that Americans would never be able to drink espresso in the same manner that Italians do. By January 1986, Howard had raised the initial seed funds required for a security lease and had begun construction on the first store. He spent every minute of his day asking for money and rushing from one meeting to the next. He explained to investors that his strategy was to reinvent a commodity. Nike was the only other brand that tried something similar at the time. He writes in his memoir that trainers were a commodity, cheap and conventional, utilitarian, and generally not very good. Nike's aim was to first build world-class running shoes, and then to surround them with an aura of top-tier athletic performance and amusing irreverence. Many of the investors he approached saw high-tech as a more appealing industry to invest in and told him outright that he was selling a crazy idea. "You can't say the name Il Giornale. How could you possibly leave Starbucks? What a stupid decision. Why on earth do you believe this will work? Americans will never pay $1.50 for coffee." Over the course of a year, Howard spoke with 242 people, 217 of whom said no. It was a trying time for him. Howard finally opened the first Il Giornale store in April 1986. They made a lot of blunders at first by reproducing an original-style coffee shop. They solely played opera from Italy. There was no seating, and the baristas wore white shirts and bow ties. It was inappropriate for Seattle, and people began to complain. As a result, they changed the music, added chairs, and provided takeaway cups. While sales exceeded expectations, he was unsure whether he could meet payroll or pay the rent at times. After months of deliberation, Howard decided to enlist the help of three of Seattle's most renowned leaders, Jack Benaroya, Herman Sarkowski, and Sam Strum. Steve Herman consented to allow Howard give a presentation to the three of them after meeting with Herman's son. Despite Stiff's requests for a lower price, auctions, and board seats, they ended up investing $750,000 as a group. Howard's luck improved even further in 1987. Jerry and Gordon made the decision to sell Starbucks. Howard would need $3.8 million to purchase Starbucks. His investors were thrilled with Il Giornale's rapid success. Therefore, he was hopeful that some of them would contribute more money. But it almost fell apart one day. Howard nearly lost Starbucks before he even tried it. One of his investors, a Seattle business leader, was going to buy Starbucks. He was certain that this individual would demote him from significant shareholder to employee and would treat some of his early investors unfairly. So Howard and Scott devised a strategy and scheduled a meeting with the investor. Scott's senior partner and Microsoft founder Bill Gates agreed to accompany him. Howard was told by the investor that if he did not accept his offer, he would never work in Seattle again. "We'll never raise another dime, and will become dog food." Howard sobbed in the lobby after the meeting concluded. Bill tried to convince him that everything would be fine, but was taken aback by his outburst. Howard met with other investors 2 days later and made a plan. Every Il Giornale investor would have the opportunity to invest in Starbucks. They realized that his approach was fair to them and praised his integrity for refusing to agree to a plan that favored large investors at the expense of smaller ones. Howard raised the $3.8 million he needed in less than a week, and the current Starbucks was created on August 18, 1987. In his memoir, he noted that many of us confront pivotal moments in our life where our dreams appear to be shattered. Such situations can never be predicted, but how you respond to them is critical. It is critical to remember your values. That's all for today. If you liked the video, subscribe to our channel Think Insider and don't forget to hit the bell icon.